Hello everybody and welcome to Vigilant Citizen. My name is Josh. Thanks for joining me again today. Today I'm going to do something a little bit different. It's probably going to be a little bit longer of a video, but I wanted to share with you and read some excerpts from a book that I read earlier this year. That there was one or two parts in this book that really impacted me, and so I wanted to share it with you. That book is Ordinary Men by Christopher R. Browning, and if you haven't heard of this book, it details the account of Reserve Police Battalion 101 in Poland. They were just regular policemen in Germany who were stationed, who got called into police action in the war, in World War II, to take part in the final solution, the resettlement of the Jewish population and the following massacre of that Jewish population. So the main point of this book is that anybody is capable of carrying out these atrocities, and anybody, if you think that you're not, this book will make you rethink that. And I highly recommend it. It's a very difficult read because of the nature of the material, for obvious reasons. It's not too long either, so I thought it warranted a place on my bookshelf. So I'm going to spend some time. I'm going to read an excerpt from it. I thought about just paraphrasing it or taking out certain parts, but I feel like that would lessen the impact. So I'm going to read the whole thing. It's going to be a little while, but I think it's pretty interesting, and hopefully it impacts you the same way that it impacted me, and we'll talk about it a little bit after that. So this comes from chapter 4. The name of the chapter is The Order Police and the Final Solution, Deportation. So this is talking about the account of some of those policemen and their actions as they were resettling the Jewish population. So I guess I'll just get right into it. I'm trying to think if there's any other context that you need. But this is the report that one of the policemen sent upwards. One graphic report by Lieutenant Paul Salader on guarding a deportation train from Dusseldorf to Riga. Oh, and that's one thing. I'm probably going to butcher a lot of these pronunciations. Feel free to correct me in the comments or something. I'm going to do my best here, though. So, guarding a deportation train from Dusseldorf to Riga on December 11, 1941. It's been published in both English and German. There's two other reports, but this is the one that we're going to go into, the one from Lieutenant Paul Salader. Well, no, this one's from a fishman. So I think he's referring that he's got three, but he's going into one from fishman. Okay, so without any further ado, I'm just going to read. And like I said, we'll get into it after. So, 152nd Police Precinct, Vienna, June 20, 1942, Report of Experiences. Subject, Transport Commando for the Jewish Transport Vienna Aspangbahnhof to Sobibor, June 14, 1942. The Transport Commando consisted of Reserve Lieutenant Fishman as leader, 2 sergeants, and 13 reserve policemen of the 1st Reserve Police Company East. The duty of the Transport Commando began at 11 a.m. on June 14, 1942, at the Aspangbahnhof, in accordance with the prior telephone request of SS Hauptsturmführer Brunner. 1. The loading of the Jews. Under the direction and supervision of SS Hauptsturmführer Brunner and SS Hauptsturmführer Gerzig of the Central Agency for Jewish Emigration, the loading of the Jews into the special train waiting in the Aspangbahnhof began at noon and went smoothly. The guard duty of the Transport Commando commenced at this time. A total of 1,000 Jews were deported. The transfer of the Jews as listed occurred at 4 p.m. Because of a shortage of cars, the Transport Commando had to make do with a third-class car instead of a second-class car. 2. Trip from Vienna to Sobibor. The train DA-38 was dispatched from Vienna at 7:08 p.m. on June 14, 1942, and traveled to Sobibor, not as scheduled, to Izbica via Lundenburg, Brunn, Nice, Opoln, Częstochowa, Kielce, Radom, Deblin, Lublin, and Kelm. Arrival in Sobibor on June 17, 1942 at 8:05 a.m. On arrival in Lublin at 9 p.m. on June 16, SS Obersturmführer Pole was waiting for the train at the station and had 51 Jews capable of work between the ages of 15 and 50 removed from the train and taken to a work camp. At the same time, he gave the order to take the remaining 949 Jews to the work camp in Sobibor. Both lists of names, 3 wagons of baggage with food supplies, as well as 100,000 zlotys were turned over to SS Obersturmführer Pole in Lublin. At 11 p.m., the train departed from Lublin for Sobibor. At the Jewish camp in Troniki, some 30 kilometers beyond Lublin, the 3 baggage wagons and food supplies were surrendered to SS Scharführer Meyerhofer. As you can tell, this is just very logistical right now, which can be sort of surprising. 3. Delivery of the Jews in Sobibor. At 8:15 a.m. on June 17, the train drove into the work camp next to the Sobibor train station, where the camp commandant, First Lieutenant Stangl, took delivery of the 949 Jews. The unloading of the train cars began immediately and was completed by 9:15 a.m. 4. Trip from Sobibor to Vienna. The return trip in the special train began about 10 a.m., immediately after the completion of the unloading of the Jews from Sobibor to Lublin, where we arrived at 2:30 a.m. on June 18. No travel expenses were paid for this train. The trip continued from Lublin at 8:13 a.m. on June 18 by a regularly scheduled express train to Krakow, where we arrived at 5:30 p.m. on the same day. In Krakow, we belayed with the 3rd Company of Reserve Police Battalion 74. On June 19, this company handed out 1 day's rations to each of the 16 men. From Krakow, the return trip was again continued on a regularly scheduled express train at 8:08 p.m. on June 19. Arrival in Vienna East train station at 6:30 a.m. on June 20. 5. The Transport Commando stopover in Krakow. The stopover of the Transport Commando in Krakow lasted 26 and a half hours. 6. Crossing the border. The special train crossed the border between the Reich and the general government on the outward journey on June 15 at 1:45 p.m. The regularly scheduled express train on the return trip at 12:15 a.m. on June 20. 7. Provisions. The men of the Transport Commando were provided with cold rations for 4 days. This consisted of sausage, bread, marmalade, and butter, but was nonetheless not sufficient. In Krakow, the daily ration of the 3rd Company of Reserve Battalion 74 was good and sufficient. 8. Suggestions. In future, it will be necessary to provide the men of the Transport Commando with marching rations, because the cold rations do not keep in the summer months. The sausage, it was a soft sausage, was already opened and cut up when handed out on June 15, and had to be consumed no later than the 3rd day because of the danger of spoiling. On the 4th day, the men had to be satisfied with marmalade, because the butter was also already rancid due to the tremendous heat in the train car. The size of the ration was also rather meager. 9. Incidents. No incidents occurred either on the outward journey, the stopovers in the train stations, or the return trip. Signed, Fishman, Precinct Lieutenant of the Schutzpolizei. There's more accounts like that in this book that he goes into and shares. I wonder if any of you out there understand what part of this hit me the most. So obviously everything that happens during here, it's cold, it's logistical, it's cold and calculating. They're just shipping these people like cattle and moving them off, and later accounts, they just calmly talk about how they had to shoot some of them. Some of them tried to escape, and the guard just offed them, right? And it's just, they're just signing a report. They're just filling out a report. It's like paper form 1049A, 900 Jews were shot this day. So obviously that can be pretty shocking to read. How does a person go from being just a normal policeman into doing something like this? But the other part, the part that really stuck out with me, because, sorry, real quick, it's kind of tragic, right? Obviously this whole thing is tragic. The people being shipped like cattle, and the people who found themselves caught up in this nightmare in which they were being ordered to ship people like cattle. I'm not excusing their actions in any way, but as Mr. Browning goes into in the book, it's helpful to understand their motivations and where they came from and why they ended up the way they did. So these were just men with families. They had to put food on the table. They had to pay for a mortgage, right? And they felt like they couldn't afford to lose any of that. So they got caught up in this crazy, nightmarish drama. But the part that really struck me when I first read this was that last section, incidents. No incidents occurred either on the outward journey, the stopovers in the train stations, or the return trip. There were 1,000 victims here. And if we go back, the transport commando consisted of Reserve Lieutenant Fishman as leader, 2 sergeants, and 13 reserve policemen of the 1st Reserve Police Company East. That's 16 people. 1,000 people sat and waited to become victims. I'm not judging them. I'm not saying that I understand what they were going through. I can't possibly fathom what was happening and what was going through their minds and what they were thinking at the time. But this book is filled with accounts like that, in which people were just led to the slaughter almost willfully. I hate saying it that way, but almost willfully. They didn't put up a fight. They didn't react. They just waited to die. And that struck me as extremely tragic. And I think about the word harmless comes to mind here, right? These people were completely harmless. And in today's society, I think we extol being harmless as a virtue, but there's nothing virtuous about being so weak and incapable of defending yourself and your loved ones that your entire family and your entire culture gets led to slaughter. Again, I know what I'm saying. I know how that can sound. Again, I'm not trying to judge. I'm not trying to say that I can completely understand. But what I do understand is that it's better to go down swinging and fighting and dying on your feet than living as a slave for some time on your knees and then dying anyway. Because you were so weak-minded and so physically weak that you couldn't stomach the notion of having to defend yourself. The ultimate lesson for me in this book was don't be harmless. Fight. Fight with everything you've got. Fight for your convictions. Go down swinging if you have to. That's better than just being a victim. Don't just be a victim. Learn how to defend yourself. Use the tools that God has given you to defend yourself, your friends, your family, your culture, your spirit, and the things that matter most in life. So I think I'm going to leave it on that note. It's pretty heavy already. Again, I'm not trying to disservice the people who experience these atrocities or anything. I think we can learn a lot from what happened during this horrible time. I think we're seeing some parallels in today's society, and I think that we really need to dig deep and understand that if you just comply with evil, your life is over anyway. So you don't comply with evil, you fight it. You fight it every step of the way, and you don't let it get a foothold into you, your life, your convictions. All right, I'll have a link to where you can get this book. I'm sure it's available at your local library too, so if you want to check it out. Pretty quick read. As I said, it's difficult though. You can see the book isn't too huge, so if you want to check it out, I highly recommend it. It's filled with valuable lessons. So, all right, thanks for joining me. Again, as always, I appreciate the conversation. Remember, don't be harmless. Be strong, be tough, be independent. Take care of yourself, your friends, your family, your convictions. Follow through. Don't let anybody make you be a victim. All right, see you in the next video. Thanks all.